All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Until then, adios.
Conversations from the Darkside.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Conversations from the Darkside. Tonight, we have listened and you have decided, and this week's topic will be messages from beyond the grave. Should be an interesting topic. We'll take calls and text messages, voice messages, and emails about messages from beyond the grave. That can include Ouija boards, actual conversations, ghostly phone calls, appearances by the dead. Really, we're pretty loose on the topic here. Whatever that comes across your mind when you hear the topic, messages from beyond the grave, we'll be more than happy to catch what you have to say. If you'll look at the bottom of the screen, you will see our various entry points for your conversations. You can call in on the Discord call line and enter our waiting room where you'll be picked by the panel to talk about your experiences on the topic. We also have email at thedarkside@email.com. Plus, you can call our 24/7 automated Darkside hotline and leave a 3-minute voicemail pertaining to this or any topic of your choosing at any time. We'd be more than happy to hear what you have to say. When we come back, we will introduce the panel and we will fire this sucker up. Stay tuned.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Darkside. You are experiencing Conversations from the Darkside.
All right, hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations from the Darkside. I'd like to, if I may, introduce the all-star panel for this evening. First, making his second appearance, you know him, you'll love him, everyone's good pal, our good friend, John Boatofcar Shawler.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here for my second appearance on Conversations from the Darkside.
And also back again after a triumphant turn on our Dreams and Nightmares show last week. Give it up for our good buddy, Jack Flack, Rob O'Hara.
Hey, man, thanks for having me back. I'm changing my name to Bad Penny. You can't get rid of me. I just keep coming back.
Good penny. So, fellas, the topic this week, messages from beyond the grave. But when you hear that, does anything pop into your head? Clearly not.
Well, it's funny because the topic, the topic itself always leads me to believe, it makes me think about what are these people doing when they're not contacting you from beyond the grave? And are they just waiting around?
It's not the dumbest question I've ever heard. What do they do for fun in the afterlife?
It's sort of like the when you're playing a dungeon crawler and you run up against Lizard King, who's been waiting on the third level in behind a locked door since time immemorial to run up against you with a sword.
Interesting. Well, bizarre. I never thought about it, but yeah, I never thought about that for 1 second. Before we get too deep into this, I want to touch base on a message I received late last week, and it was before. I noticed it after the show was over, but I wanted to play. It was a voicemail I got from our good friend Alan, and I'm going to hush the music here, if I may, and we're going to listen to this. This is a voicemail about his dreams. Are you guys ready? Here we go.
So I want to tell you a story about a dream that a friend of mine had when he was in college. He told me about this dream. And I'd say it's just about the most terrifying dream that I could imagine. Strange thing about this dream is that it starts with him waking up in his room. So he wakes up in his room. It's early morning. It's still dark. And a man comes into the room. Like a stranger, like an old man. He doesn't recognize him. And the old man says to him, "You can't wake up. I've trapped you here. And you're going to stay here with me forever." So when he hears this, he's pretty shook up. Tries to wake up. He wakes up. He's in his room. Looks around. It's early morning. The guy comes in again. Looks at him and says, "I told you. You can't wake up. You're stuck here with me." So by now he's getting pretty shook up. He tries again. He wakes up again. He's sitting there. Just as he thinks he's okay, the guy comes in again and says, "You can keep trying, but this isn't going to work. You're stuck here forever." And would you believe he went through this process 5 or 6 times? By the 6th time he woke up, he was in a cold sweat. But the guy didn't come back. He was back to the real world. But he was absolutely terrified and still convinced that this guy was going to come back. Took him quite a while to get over it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story. Take it easy now.
Wow, chilling stuff there from Alan. You may also know Alan is the same. This is the same Alan that worked on Asteroids RX. So on the ZX Spectrum, what'd you think of that one, fellas?
Yeah, and that delivery too, boy, he needs to pursue a career in voiceover work.
Yeah,
that was great.
He sounded real good, very well done. But what do you think about a story like that? Have you ever had anything like that happen to you, Rob?
You know, first of all, isn't it? You know, we depend on our minds every day. Like, I mean, we think like our minds are what keep us sane, right? Like when you think about somebody who suffers from mental illness or you know, has hallucinations or stuff, it's like something's not right with their brain. And so we depend on like being on the same team as our mind, and which is where our dreams come from, you know. So have a dream like that where your brain is like just coming up with something horrifying, and then you wake up and what are you going to do? Like, you're not going to, you know, beat up your own brain. Like there's no revenge against that. But I don't know, man. I did have a recurring dream when I was a kid, and it was all because this is a funny story. It was all because I tried to shove my best friend out my window.
I want to hear this.
A friend of mine came over, one of my best friends, my buddy Andy, and we were jumping on my bed. And my bed was right next to my window, which was pretty high up. And as we were bouncing, I thought, I wonder what would happen if he just went out that window. Like, I mean, I wasn't like I wasn't psychotic, but I was like 10. It seemed pretty funny. And so anyway, just, you know, as I kind of just pretended to, you know, nudge him a little bit. And he immediately fell backwards, and it broke part of my window, and it also bent the screen. And so we had to, and then I had to pretend like it was an accident, you know. But I never, after that point, had a screen in my window the whole rest of the time when I was a kid. So when I would open the window, it would just be wide open to the outside. And I started kind of developing this fear of somebody coming in through the window. And I would have these dreams at night where I would be laying in bed and kind of doze off and have these dreams where I was still in my room and a guy's head would come up, but like the top part of his head was missing, like the skull was missing, so I could see his brains or something. And he would say, "I told you to close your window," and then things would kind of move. I think this is around the time Poltergeist came out too, like things are flying around my room, you know.
Man.
And like I had that dream. I mean, I must have had that dream 20 times, and then I would wake up and I would immediately, I mean, now you're torn, right? Do you check to make sure the window's closed, like you hope it is, but do you go towards the window where you just saw, you know, old headless Harry sticking his head up? So I don't know, man, but yeah, it's just funny how your brain like gets in loops like that and plays tricks on you.
Yeah,
you know, it's, I think that the head in the bedroom window thing is so prevalent because it combines the familiar and the unknown and the scary all in one, because there's no place that you feel more comfortable, you know, ideally, than in your own room, in your own bed. But then when you suddenly introduce the unknown through, you know, a window or a closet or whatever, I think that that's why that sort of thing is so prevalent with people, because all of a sudden you're taking something that's very familiar and you're introducing something, you know, totally unfamiliar.
Right. You know, I mean, that's the scariest for me, like watching horror movies. I'm not scared about, you know, an alien guy coming, because I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen to me. But you know, then when you watch these things where it's just a normal family that all of a sudden gets terrorized, those things are horrifying, because it does play on that, you know, you're in reality, you're in your safe, you're in your home. Those home invasion things are terrifying to me.
You know, I think, Bo, you really nailed it there. I never thought about it that way, about the familiar and the unknown. My number one fear when I was a kid, I saw that Stephen King movie where the vampire boy flies up at the kid's window. What was that called? Salem's Lot. That's what it was called. And man, I was scared the crap out of me. I was at my granny. She had HBO. You know, we didn't get that crap at my house. And so forever, even up to this point, that's something that's still like in the back of my head, being scared that someone's going to tap on my window, you know, and one in. Creepy stuff. With that said, we will focus our attention to the topic at hand this week: messages from beyond the grave. Now, to start us off here, I have received an email from our good pal Barkbit. I'm going to read this real quick and so you guys can tell me what you think here. I haven't got to read this yet, so it's the first time I went through it. Barkbit writes, "About 15 years ago, me and my to-be wife lost a close friend of ours. This was a sudden and sad affair that shook us both, so we had some relatives and friends over the following days that we vented and shared stories with. At the time, we were both quite upset and didn't reflect on what happened during these talks, but a few weeks later, when we were alone one night, we both mentioned the same thing. The lights over our kitchen table had started to flicker whenever the demise of our friend was mentioned. While we found this weird and a bit disturbing, we kind of disregarded it with a smile and jokingly said our friend was there, or sending a message of some sort. As we were having this discussion, we were on the couch in front of our brand new 32-inch widescreen CRT TV. This was a big beast of a thing, which frame was probably about 5 inches deep, and on top, we still had a few lit candles. We sat quietly for a while, looking at the dark screen, when suddenly we heard a screech. Clear as day, we both, in disbelief, saw one of the heavy glass candle holders slowly sliding across the TV's frame, only to fall down and shatter on the floor. We looked at each other and just nodded. This was no coincidence. Our friend was saying, "Yep, I'm still with you." That was from Barkbit. I would not be as calm if I saw that, I don't think, fellas. What about you?
Whenever things start moving around the room unexpectedly, I think that's cause for alarm. I would probably vacate the premises and not come back until morning. That's freaky stuff.
Do you
Well, that's when you start to question how good of friends were you, you know?
Right. Right.
have either one of you had an experience where you were you think you may have been contacted by the dead in some way like that, with or it's shortly after a deceased person passed on? Anything like that ever happened?
I haven't, but when I was 18, one of my best friends died in a car wreck. He was 18 too. And at his funeral, his dad, who was a volunteer fire department, volunteer firefighter in Hurricane, said that his son, my friend, actually came to him while he was at the firehouse, and he was just sitting in the office there, and he turned around and there he was, and he said that he said his name is TJ. He said TJ said, I'm fine, everything's okay. And then he just left, and he said that was the only sort of contact that he had. But that's always stuck with me, because that's the only time somebody I've actually known has appeared from beyond the grave. Luckily, I don't have too many friends that have passed on. So
very creepy stuff.
Yeah, I talked to my wife a little bit after last week's episode about the dreams and things, and the one thing that she said, which ties into tonight's show, is that her father passed away the year after she graduated high school. So she was a freshman in college, and her dad passed away. And she told me, and she has told me this before, that she sometimes has dreams about her dad, but not dreams about her dad, dreams where her dad visits her. And she told me that the way that she can tell the difference is that sometimes she will dream like she's hanging out with her dad, and whenever she wakes up, she can smell him. And she said it's just a thing that she doesn't question. She just thinks, that she's had that experience, that he shows up every now and then. And in those dreams, it's never about them going somewhere. It's just about them sitting somewhere and talking and catching up, And so, I haven't had anything like that with dreams, but I do come to you tonight with a story that I want to tell you. I want to preface this by saying this is 100% true. I'm not pulling your leg. I'm not, stretching the truth. This is a 100% true story, which happened 7 years ago now. So 7 years ago, my favorite uncle, my Uncle Joe, passed away. And he passed away a few days before my 40th birthday, and we went to, he lived in Chicago, and, he was that type of uncle. Like, he had this big house. He had a dedicated Three Stooges room. Just
nice.
Three Stooges collectibles. He had just all this stuff, like Chicago collectibles and stuff. And he was definitely a guy who was, I think it was probably a lot like me, to be honest with you. Like, he would always go up to the Legion with $20 in his pocket, and would go up there and get smashed and have to walk home because he drank so much. And he would always come home with the $20. Like, he couldn't buy himself a drink. People always bought him drinks, and he was just a fun guy. A lot of, he had a lot of jobs that were in the public, so a lot of people knew him and stuff. And so anyway, we went up for the funeral, and I ended up being a pallbearer on my 40th birthday for my Uncle Joe. So that was definitely a birthday and a time and experience that I'll never forget. All these things.
That's a real bummer there.
Kind of, it all overlaps, and having all your family come in and stuff. They had a wake, and they had to extend it for 2 days because so many people from the city and stuff came, and it was quite the event. So anyway, the little memorial sheets that you get at the funeral, we got one of those. And when we came home, my wife had a little frame that was the perfect size for it. And so she put it in this frame and put it in our laundry room. And this was in the last house that I lived with. And it was a relatively new house. So it's not, this ancient 100-year-old house with creaking boards and stuff. I mean, this is a, 5 or 6 year old house. This is a modern house. And she put it in the laundry room and hung it right by the washer and dryer. And just like the story you were just reading, I would go in there and the lights would flicker. It was such a weird thing. And I'm the type of person that's predisposed not to really believe that there's something. I would be more apt to think that there's something going on with the wiring or the fluorescent light than, that this picture of my Uncle Joe is making the lights flicker when I walk in. But it was kind of undeniable that it was happening. We were walking, you'd go in there and then the lights would kind of flicker. And this was our laundry room was in off of a hallway that went between the garage and the main part of the house. So we always left that light on. So it wasn't like it was warming up, or anything like that. Like the light bulb was always on, and then and you could see it from other parts of the house. So it would be on, and then you would walk in there and it would kind of flicker. And so at some point I told my wife, I said, you gotta move this photo. This thing's creeping me out. Like every time I go in here, I'm looking at this picture of my Uncle Joe. And she says, all right, well, where do you want me to move it? And I said, you know what? Why don't you ask Uncle Joe? I said, you ask him, and then you put the picture wherever you want to put. So in our bedroom, there were a set of sunken in bookshelves. It was right next to my bed. And she literally, took this picture and kind of walked around for a minute and said, I think that's where I want to put it. I want to put it by these shelves. I went back in the living room. And then I heard her say my name. She says, Rob, come in here. And I was like the way that she said it, it was a little bit of maybe some fear, maybe some astonishment. Like I don't really know, And so I go in there. She's got the picture sitting on the bookshelf, and she says, I want you to touch the bookshelf. And I said, okay, like, is it going to be hot or cold or something? And so I kind of touched it, and she said, no, give it a push. And as I pushed the bookshelf was on hinges and opened up into a hidden area in my house. I swear to you on all that holy, this is a true story. The upstairs part of my house, there was a big area underneath the stairs. It was a staircase that went halfway up and then turned 180 degrees and went the other halfway. And so what it looks like is that the former owners, the original owners of the house, cut out a doorway and hung this shelf, which was then stuck closed with magnets. So you could put things on the shelf and never know that it would move. But if you pushed it just hard enough, magnets disengaged and this thing opened up into this area. I mean, the area was large enough where, easily 6 adults could walk in there. And then there was another area underneath where the steps were, which is where we started storing our Christmas tree. And we knew the realtor that had sold us the house, and we asked her, did she know about it? And she said, no, she had no idea. Nobody had ever told her. So we'd been living in this house with this basically secret little mini, bigger than a walk-in closet, a large area that we had never discovered. And we never would have found that unless my wife had put the picture of Uncle Joe on those shelves and dusted them off. So, was Uncle Joe showing us where the hidden thing was, or was it a series of coincidences? I don't really know. I can't tell you, but I can tell you that story is 100% true, that by following a picture of my Uncle Joe, we found a hidden room in our house.
If there's ever been a message from beyond the grave, Uncle Joe was giving you some extra footage to store your tree.
I'm waiting for the lights to start flickering right now.
What a tale. Holy, so what do you think about that, Boat? Holy smokes.
I know this isn't the dream episode, but one of my recurring dreams as a child was always finding a hidden room in my basement. I would walk down there and I would push on one of the bricks, because there was a brick wall down there, and it would swing open, and it would be tons and tons of video games.
It was a dream.
Wow. If there had been video games of that hidden thing, then that would have been full circle. That would have been great.
But it is, I think it's one of the ultimate fantasies of home ownership. Well, I guess it could swing either way depending on what's in there, is finding, a secret area. There's got to be 1 in 1,000 people that have found a full secret room in their house. That's incredible. I love that.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I will tell you that we looked at each other when it opened up, and I said, you know what we can use this for? And it was like a a bit in a comedy film, and at the exact same time, she said, "Put our suitcases here," and I said, "Sex dungeon." And boy, I should have waited a beat and waited to see what she said first, because I could tell you, for the next 5 years, that is exactly where we kept our suitcases.
Where'd you put your sex dungeon equipment? That's what I want to know.
I was going to buy some.
Oh.
You know, you gotta. Once you get a new room, you have to, fill it with stuff.
That is quite a tale. Well, listen, everyone, what a tale. We're going to pop out for a brief commercial, and then we're going to start taking live calls. We've got some people here waiting patiently in the Discord chat room. If you would like to join us here on Discord, we'd love to have you. The address is at the bottom of the screen. It's bit.ly/conversations-from-the-dark-side. Come on in here, hop in the room, and when it's your turn, we will have you raise your hand, and we'll bring you in to talk with myself and Jack Flack and John Boatofcar Shawler. We'll be back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. This is Conversations from the Dark Side.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Dark Side.
Here in West Virginia, we've tested all of our activities for maximum family fun. Everything has been tested and retested to make sure your West Virginia vacation will be the best your family has ever had. So call today for more information and test out West Virginia for yourself.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Dark Side.
All right, we are back. And again, the topic this week, messages from beyond the grave. Again, we'd love you to join us. You have multiple avenues to come speak with us. You can call us even during the show on the automated voicemail line. Leave a voicemail. We'll play it on the air if you're the shy type. You can also hop in our Discord chat and talk to us just like our next caller did. Who are you and where are you from, sir?
I am one of the TeamSpeak regulars, Patrick.
Oh, yes, Pat. How are you tonight?
Doing well, sir. Doing well. I'm from the mountains of West Virginia.
It's all the mountains, isn't it?
Well, it's about 10 degrees colder up here than it is where you are, so I'm more mountain.
What's the temperature out there, Pat?
I think it's supposed to be 38 tonight.
Very good, very good. So, what did you think of Flack's tale of his secret sex dungeon?
I want to hear the next part of the story of what his wife thought after both of those things were said simultaneously. So
she's probably used to that from Flack.
Probably so.
I told her one time, I teased her for a while, I wanted to buy a school bus to convert it, and that was a long-running thing. And I finally mentioned it to her. I said, I'm going to buy a school bus. And she said, you better hope it's comfortable to sleep in. And so it took me a minute for that to sink in, but I got a feeling that, if I had built a dungeon in this secret room, I would also be living in it.
Yeah, make sure it had a comfortable bed. So no, as somebody that's used to, refinish and restore old houses, I've found tons of strange little rooms and stuff in places. I'm sure they served a purpose at one point in time, but they just got walled up or covered up or whatever the case is, mostly like root cellars and stuff, so they just weren't used anymore.
Did you ever find anything cool or freaky in there?
A pocket watch once, old newspapers from like right around the turn of the century, to old deck of cards, just tons of strange little things. You just give them to the owners of the house, and it is what it is.
Now, Pat, I've known you for quite a while, my friend.
Yes.
And I know that you have dabbled in all sorts of nefarium, including Ouija boards and milling around in graveyards. What do you know, or what can you tell us about your experiences with messages from beyond the grave?
Well, the story I have for you this evening is one that happened in my old house, the house I grew up in. From the time we moved there when I was probably less than 1, and I moved out when I was 18, 19, something like that. And it was a doctor's office in the back and a funeral home in the front. And so that's where I grew up. And in fact, someone who actually remembered it when it was a funeral home came over, and when I sat on the couch, where our TV was setting was exactly where they would set the caskets for the viewings. So it's kind of like we had our TV room set up just like they did. So instead of viewing the TV, they were viewing bodies.
That is no good. So the place you just stared, did you ever notice any oddness when you were watching TV?
I think that's what my wife got on me for earlier this evening. I was talking about the show. I was like, hey, tonight's the show. You know, it's Friday night show. We gotta tune in and listen. It's gonna be cool. And I said, but I really don't know that I have anything for tonight. And she just like gave me that look like, you're an idiot, which I mean, I just know the look by now. You know, I get it so frequently. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's just like, you're desensitized because you saw so much crap in that house that you don't think of it as being weird. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. Because the story I have tonight is the first time she heard something in the house from beyond the grave.
Okay.
And it freaked her out completely, and I was like, meh, okay, next, you know. And she was not as happy about it as, you know. She took it a little more seriously. We were sitting on the couch. We were the only two in the house. My parents were out of town, and we were watching television. I think we were probably making out, honestly, is what I think we were doing. But she swears watching television. Because you would do that when you're the only two people in the house. But anyway, we're expecting my sister to come by and drop some food off, because she was going to be coming down, and I think we're going to have a party that weekend, and she was going to be bringing some stuff down, so she was going to come down with some food. So I was listening for her, and we're sitting on the couch, and I hear my sister yell my name. And I'm like, oh, crap, I forgot to unlock the door. So I got up, ran out of the living room, ran down the hallway, through a couple other rooms, into the kitchen, ran to the back door to unlock it so she could bring the food in. Man, there was nobody there. And I'm like, okay, well, obviously she knew we were in the front of the house. So she just walked around to the front porch. So I'll look around, turn around, run back through the kitchen, and I meet my now wife, then girlfriend, in the hallway. And she's got this real disturbed look on her face. And I'm like, what's up? And she's just like, that's not your sister. And I'm like, yeah, it is. She's at the front door. She's like, there's nobody at the front door. Because she had just come from the front door area. And I was like, sure. And she's like, no, there's nobody here. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. So I walked back and looked, and sure enough, out in the driveway in the garage, my sister's car wasn't there. And she goes, the voice wasn't coming from outside. The voice was coming from upstairs. And I'm like, oh, okay. Because the stairs leading to the upstairs was right near the living room. So when I heard her yell, I couldn't tell where it was coming from exactly. So I ran into the kitchen, and then I heard her yell again, and it sounded like the other side of the house. But my wife was standing in the hallway. She's like, the voice was coming from upstairs. And I'm like, oh, that must just be the nurse then, whoever the lady that, you know, there's a lady that wandered around the house every once in a while dressed in like a nurse's uniform or something. And I guess she just was yelling at me for some reason. I don't know what it was, you know. But anyway, that was the first time. I mean, that's not the first time I'd heard it, but that's the first time that Barb had been exposed to someone yelling one of our family members' names in the house, and you got to go track down who it is or where they're at, or, you know. But I just got to the point where, you know, do I believe in the paranormal? I'm sure there's tons of stuff out there that we don't understand. I'll say that. And far be it for me to think that I have any more say in being here than they do. So usually I just ended up being like, well, obviously they wanted my attention for something, so I'd stand there for a minute and be like, you got me, what do you want? And either you'd hear something else or you wouldn't. I'd be like, all right. And then I was going about my business, and that's kind of how I treated it after that. But some of my friends that I had over didn't take to my less than relaxed or nonchalant attitude about the voices.
I like your
So-
philosophy there on
Yeah,
that.
I got a question for you guys on the panel. Would it bother you to live in a place that used to be a funeral home? And I have a story about that real quick, but I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Didn't bother me.
I was going to say that clearly didn't bother Pat.
Right? Yeah, Pat's good.
I think I was dated a girl for a long time that is a ghost hunter and a paranormal, a folklorist and whatnot. And so I've been to many places with her that are supposed to be haunted and whatnot. And sometimes you go there and you don't get any, and you just go there just like any other place. Sometimes you get a weird feeling, and then a very few times you go somewhere and you get a real bad feeling. So I think my answer to the question would be, if I could go in there and didn't feel weirded out, I would probably better pull it off. If I did feel weirded out, then probably not. So I'd have to go there and check it out and spend a little time there before I could make a determination.
I do think around our house it was treated as so kind of nonchalantly. Like, I remember one night I had stayed out exceptionally late, or maybe it was a weekend worth of staying out late, and I can't remember, but my dad was watching TV in the living room. He was sitting in a chair, and I came in and laid down on the couch and just passed out cold, on the couch. And apparently I was snoring through football or something like that, and he woke me up, and we had some conversations. I was like, you don't mind me laying here? He said, yeah, but my God, son, you're out so cold. I thought you should have been laying on the other side of the room. Which was the side, our couch was on one side, and where they used to view was on the other. He said, if I was getting worried about you, I thought you might have.
That's a
needed to
great
be laying
line.
on the other side, And I was like, oh, sorry, But it was, we didn't think, never thought anything of it exactly, But did I see a bunch of stuff? I didn't see a ton of stuff. I heard things. I didn't see people. My brother, oldest brother, used to say he always saw the lady in the nurse's clothing, because I guess back in the 30s and 40s, nurses had that very specific look. Not so much now where it's just scrubs or whatever, but they had the white pressed uniform and everything.
Sure, yeah.
Said he saw her a couple of times walking around in the upstairs of the house. And I don't know.
The reason I bring it up is there is a pretty prominent funeral parlor in my town that went out of business, and then for a while it opened itself up as an event place, and it's where my sister got married. And so we went there. The inside it was like a church, and there were pews and you sat down, and how like there's usually a separate area where the bride gets ready and the bridesmaids and all that, so nobody could see them or whatever. And they were like, oh, there's a separate building. And I'm like, yeah, that's where they used to cremate people. It's like the cremation building that they had done that. But anyway, I guess a lot of people didn't like going, they went out of business, after a few years. And it has since been repurchased. And for the past 10 years, it has been a daycare called Peanut Butter Jelly Time. And
every part of that's wrong.
I know. I just don't.
There's no right to that.
Wow.
My kids are older, but I always think about that. Like, I wonder if I would. How would I feel about sending my kids to a place that used to be a funeral parlor? But
Children, if everyone's good today, we get to visit the crematorium again.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe if you're good, you won't have to visit it.
Would be a better. They'll make peanut butter jelly for you.
Yeah, it'd be a better way to put it. That is creepy stuff. By the way, I didn't get to hear you talk. Would you live in a funeral parlor?
Boy, I always think about places like the Sharon Tate house, you know, places where horrible stuff has happened in the past, and you wonder, like, how long does it take? Well, like, you know, I went to what some consider to be the most haunted campus in the country, which is Ohio University. You might not know that, but it's true. And there was a room in my dorm that I lived in my sophomore year that they actually boarded up after somebody killed themselves in there, because nobody wanted to live in a room where, you know, somebody killed themselves. And you wonder, how long does it take for the sort of supernatural taint to wear off, or is it, you know, it's. I think I'd probably just have to knock the house down and start again from scratch, is what I'm saying. No,
Really?
no funeral parlor. Yeah, no good.
But I mean, if you think about it, nothing really bad happened there. I mean, people, sure, they had funerals there. Whatever bad happened somewhere else.
I guess that's a good point. That's
They
a good
brought them there. Now, granted, there's a lot of emotion, or a lot of sadness associated with that, but that's by the living.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's
My wife and I are split so far on this issue. I told her, I said, I could move into that place tomorrow and I could cook pizzas in that crematorium thing. It wouldn't bother me in the slightest. And she wants no part of it. She does not want to go in. And I will tell you, my buddy Andy, who works for the local fire department, is if you ever go house shopping, don't go with somebody who works for the fire department, because I've driven around town with him before, and he will point out, oh, that's where that lady hung herself. Oh, you don't want that house. You don't, you know,
Oh,
he knows
yeah. Oh, that's
everything that's happened. Yeah.
My grandfather was chief of police. He was like that too. Like, see that house
Exactly,
over
yeah.
there? I'm like, oh yeah, that's a real pretty. Yeah, lady blew a guy's head off in that one. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. I mean, I was like 10 years old hearing those stories.
And now for me, I'm like, you know, put some spackle and some paint, and I get a discount. I'm all about the cheap.
I love
You know, I don't know. I think I'm kind of with Aaron on this one. I think it has to do with the feel of the place. I mean, did strange things go on there? Sure, all the time. Did I ever feel malice, or did I ever feel that my life was somehow being threatened? No, only by my siblings occasionally, but never, you know, but never, no, never by any other cause. Now, if I'd have felt things like that, you know, maybe I'd be adamantly opposed to it, but you know,
Sure,
I never have. But you and I, Aaron, have been in some places where I wasn't necessarily particularly happy to be.
Yeah, I've been in more than a few places like that. It's a funny thing about, you know, the topic Messages from Beyond the Grave. It goes into a lot of different areas, and if one of the messages they send out is to make you feel creeped out whenever you're walking around, or make you feel like you don't want to be there, then absolutely they are getting through on some of these. Let's Pat, why don't you hang around to the next break here? We're going to take a quick time out, and then we'll come back. And another thing I want to broach with you fellas, since I've got you here, I want to talk a little bit about messing around with the old Ouija board when we get back. So hang out, everybody. We'll be back in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. This is Conversations from the Darkside.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Darkside. You are experiencing Conversations from the Darkside.
All right, we are back. We've got a 3-man group here along with myself. We've got our good buddy, John Boatofcar Shawler, our good pal, Jack Flack, and our fine caller, Patrick. I want to mention to you guys once again that if you're interested in joining the gang here, feel free to pop on our Discord call line listed on the screen right there. You can also email us at thedarkside@email.com. You can also leave us a text message or a call on our automated voicemail at 304-397-0810. Open anytime and ready to take your 3-minute or less voice message. Now, when we left, guys, we were just talking about places that creeped us out, and in general, where we think maybe the dead are bare minimum making us uncomfortable. Flack, what were you saying about that when we left?
Oh, that was 2 stories ago, Aaron. No, I think we were just saying that, whether or not we would be bothered by living in those places or whatever. But, it depends on how you feel spirits or something from the other world would connect to you. Is it from a place? Like, are they stuck in a place like where something happened, like a house or something? Or can you open that channel of communication, which I think kind of brings us into Ouija boards, and I know different people, I know some people that are just deathly afraid, you know what I mean, of they won't mess with them, they won't look at them. Now, I had a friend, my buddy Jeff, who I talk about all the time on my shows and my podcasts, came over to my house in 8th or 9th grade, somewhere around there, and brought a Ouija board. And all I knew about Ouija boards was from The Exorcist. I think there's a Ouija board in there, and then from the movie Witchboard. And neither of those, like, things don't go well, right? So they,
Yeah.
like, it hasn't come with, good tidings or whatever. And so, I knew that they were like these ancient boards that had been created to facilitate communications with spirits and people from the other world. And I asked him, I was like, did you, get this for you inherit it from, a relative or something? He said, no, I got it at Walmart. And I always thought it was funny. It was a Ouija board made by Parker Brothers.
Yeah.
That's what he had. And so that took a little bit of the mysticism away out of it, from me. And the two of us messed around with it, and either he was moving it or I was moving it. We took turns moving it, and then eventually we were like, oh, all right, let's both promise this time neither of us will move it. And then of course it didn't move, so we didn't have any luck with that Ouija board. And I eventually, once I was a little bit older and calling PC based BBSs, so this would have been the early to the mid 90s, I gave it to a guy. And there were all these different BBSs, and of course guys on BBSs were always talking about how to hack things or how to blow things up or how to things like that, right? But there was this one BBS that was all girls, and
Whoa.
they had it was 5 sysops, and they were all girls.
All right.
And they would post all these crazy stories. Like, they would post that they were having a BBS, pillow fight. And it was very different than the guy culture that kind of existed in the BBS world. Like, they weren't worried about blowing stuff up. They were just telling fun stories and all these tales. And eventually they started this whole thread about how they had begun talking to spirits. And like, this spirit had a name and a backstory and all these crazy things, and that they had started communicating to the spirit with an Ouija board. And they said that they had done all these things. And so it was a quite extensive tale that they told. I mean, that went, over several weeks about how this spirit, and then how it was more and more, becoming aggressive, and they had to get rid of this Ouija board because they felt like they had opened some portal of communication, And then towards the end of the story, they were like, we felt bad because this guy had loaned us this Ouija board. And I was like, hey, that's the guy I loaned my Ouija board. And then I realized that it was my Ouija board that they were talking about. and which was really Jeff's Ouija board. So I always found, I love this whole story where, you know, they had all these things, and they were, whether or not they were really convinced they were talking to ghosts, I don't really know. But that it was the same Ouija board that I had owned and that it had been loaned out. So, and then, you know, I mentioned it to one of them one time, and they said, well, it doesn't matter. It's not about who made it. It's not, you know, Parker Brothers isn't putting the spirits in there. It's a tool, something that facilitates that communication, that opens that communication channel. And it doesn't matter if it's a toy or a real one or whatever. And I never really thought about it that way, but I did enjoy the fact that, you know, supposedly my Ouija board was used in this crazy tale. But I'm assuming you guys have been to a party, or, you know, maybe when you were younger or something, and seen people playing with Ouija boards. Have you ever had any quote unquote success with that? Or
Well,
Well,
I'll hop in
thing
here
is-
real quick.
Yeah, go
I'll
ahead.
jump in for you, man. I lived with a guy named Big Head, and Big Head had a philosophy where, his name was.
that sounds like a story in and of itself.
His
right
name
there.
was Todd, but
Oh, okay, all right.
I called him Big Head because of the band, and our other roommate called him that because she thought he was arrogant. But either way it went, we loved Big Head.
I call him
but-
Big Head because his head was larger than his body.
Yeah, he had a big head, but Big Head had a philosophy on this where he said they wouldn't work if you didn't make it yourself, and he actually made his own Ouija board. I remember you remember that, Pat? He actually sort of
Yes.
singed it and stuff. I always thought that was kind of
Yes.
cool. But you know, I've had the Ouija out plenty of times. I mean, many times, not just at parties, but like actually in places that were allegedly haunted, you know, among other times. And, you know, when you say, did we have a success or, listen, I've seen that, the Flechette move all over that board at an alarming rate. And sometimes it spells out stuff. Sometimes it says nonsense. I personally have never moved it. That's my philosophy on this, because I'm not intentionally anyway. But so you never know. One would assume that someone's screwing with you, right? But that's the whole point of the Ouija board. You mentioned it, Rob, when you played with it with your buddy. It didn't go anywhere. Well, no one did anything, you know. So it makes you wonder if there's anything to it. But all that said, they are central to a lot of ghost stories and movies and stuff, you know, paranormal ghost groups and stuff on TV. You see them using that stuff all the time, the old Ouija board. It is, you're right, when you look at something, I've got one sitting up here right beside me, actually, on the shelf, and it's on top of, like, you got Monopoly, you got Clue or whatever, and they're all made by the same guy. So, I mean, I suppose technically you could take the Clue board and get out the dice or something, and maybe you could use that to talk to the dead if it didn't matter. It is weird to use something you bought at Kmart to communicate with the dead. It's always struck me as kind of strange. But I can't say, I've never been using one and all of a sudden, like, a portal opened or anything like that. Pat, I know you've used them plenty. In fact, me and Pat's wife have used the Ouija at a party one time, and we had some success. Pat, you've used it a few times over the years.
But it always kind of goes back to me is, can you prove it? You know, can you really guarantee that somebody's not moving it? Is there some sort of, you know, and to me, I kind of go down the same road. You know, if a gypsy cut down a certain tree in the middle of the night on a full moon and, you know, burned these words into it, and you had a special crystal that was a center, I mean, and it was made by a family of people who made them, maybe it has power. But, you know, when it's made by Walmart, you know, I don't know. I just have an issue with the mass production, you know, of that kind of stuff. But you know, it's
Only talk to
far
Sam
for me to
Walton
say.
about
I mean,
it,
I've seen some strange things happen. You always hear one of the biggest explanations about feeling creepy when you're doing any sort of paranormal investigation is, well, you have an electric current nearby. You have an ungrounded electric current, and that tends to mess with you know, the human magnetic field that can cause make you feel like you're being watched. Make
In
you
this
feel
state,
like there's something
everyone's
there.
got that. Everyone in the whole state has an ungrounded electrical current in their house because
Well,
most of the wiring was done before they invented the ground. They just put them in there.
Yeah. So, but one of the most intense feelings I ever got of being watched, or that there was somebody there that didn't want me there, was out in the middle of a field one night, and there was not an electric line or pole within eyesight of me, and well, it could have been buried. Not in this state. They don't.
No.
Sorry, we haven't got that technology yet.
No.
You know, so, and certainly not way back then. But you were with me, and it was that night that we made that list of all those strange places my grandfather told me to go.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we ended up being at there was that cemetery right across the street from the church out near the lake.
That narrows it down, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that well, I don't want to be too uber specific, but you know where we're at.
Yeah.
And we were looking around at different places, and we just got into this one little area, and it was almost nauseating. It was just the oppressive urge to just get out of there was ridiculous. And it was all centered around one specific little area. And come to find out, when you do enough research on who all's in that area, it was an unsavory individual there. And but anywhere else we walked that night, we didn't have any problem in the world, and there was no electric lines there. There was no anything there. So, I'd like for somebody to explain that one to me. And we didn't even know of the unsavory individual until after I did my research. So
I definitely remember that experience. That was a weird night.
Because you were like, "Let me get one more picture." I'm like, "Would you please take the picture?"
Yeah.
Because I want to be as far away from here as I can. But yeah.
You mentioned an interesting thing, and I did want to comment on that when you were saying you did your research, and that's what I would want from an Ouija board now. Like, if I was sitting down with people and you would be like, "What is your name?" And then it says Jill, and I'd be like, "No, I want first, middle, last, and you tell me when you were born and died, and I'm going to look it up on Google right now." And if that's not accurate, then somebody's moving this thing.
Or my favorite one is, I would like to speak to somebody, because if you can talk to anybody, you talk to anybody. I want to talk to somebody from Finland.
Right. I just imagine,
because
100 billion people in line at a payphone in heaven or something, like, hold on, it's for you. Get Abraham Lincoln up here.
but I'm just saying, though, if the Ouija board is speaking or spelling out a language that none of the people at the table know, it wins.
Well,
how
would you know if it just started spelling?
You'd have to write
out?
the letters down and see if it spelled something.
If it's me and I'm using the Ouija and I want to make sure I've got something cooking, what you do is once you establish contact, you go, "Let me speak to your manager," and in that way you're sure to get a big man, the big man there in charge. Before we go to break here, I want to ask Boat real quick. Boat, I've got to ask you this. Have you, John Boatofcar Shawler, have you ever tangled with the Ouija?
Yeah, when I was younger, I tangled with the Ouija. But these days, this is one of these things that I just don't want to do. Not because I think that it's fake; it's because I think it's real. I think that there are ways to channel spirits and things like that. And you're sometimes there's the possibility of opening doors that you might not want to open. I believe in stuff like demonic possession and stuff like that. I believe in the forces of evil that are that are beyond what we can see and experience in normal life. And I don't want to give those things any opportunity to get a hold of me. So I stay away from that stuff.
Hey, that's not the worst philosophy, Boaster, I gotta say. Listen, we're gonna take our last break. And so if you are interested in popping on, leaving a message, or getting involved, this is the last break. We will be back after these short messages.
You are experiencing Conversations from the Darkside. You are experiencing Conversations from the Darkside.
All right, we are back with the final segment here on Conversations from the Dark Side. Wanted to touch, before we get back to the panel here, we'd had a few messages scroll by. My buddy Leroy's in the house tonight. He's mentioned several things on here that I thought were particularly creepy because he jarred my memory on some of this stuff. We had a good friend of ours named Rich who passed away. Gosh, it would have been probably 17, 18 years ago now. Gosh, or maybe less, maybe 12. And Rich was a real good friend of both of ours, and we took his death pretty hard. And we often would think he would communicate with us. We were chatting one time up at my old house, and I had his picture on an entertainment center. And at one time, as we were talking about it, it fell off. That was pretty creepy. I used to have these bead curtains, and occasionally we'd be chatting or something, and those things would just start shaking on their own. Stuff like that. Pretty creepy stuff from back in the day. I think we could agree that if we perceive that the dead are speaking to us, it's super duper creepy. But would anyone say with certainty that the dead can speak to you, the living? Does any of y'all think that with 100% certainty?
I can't say for certain just because it's never happened to me, you know. Like I've never had someone tell me. And again, you know, this kind of goes back to with our things of dreams. Like people will say, oh, I had a dream of someone and they told me something, but it's something that you must have already known, you know. So that, for me, that would have to be the proof that I would need. I would need to get a message from someone who told me a fact that I know for a fact I don't know, and then look it up and find that's true. And if that happens, Rob's going to be changing a lot of things in his life.
Yeah, I like that's a great answer. What about you, Boat? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm open to the possibility that that people that have moved on to the next life can interact with people in this life. You know, I'm Catholic, and there's all kinds of stories of apparitions in the church. You know, the Virgin Mary appearing at various times in history, various saints appearing as apparitions to guide people and help people. So I'm open to the possibility that it exists, but I have not experienced it myself.
And Pat?
You know, I come from the the theory that they're just, I don't know, I personally don't know enough, and I don't think enough has been done. It's like the old analogy of taking a spoonful of ocean water and looking at it and going, well, there's no sharks in my spoon, so obviously sharks don't exist. You know,
Yes.
I think, you know, we haven't done, we just don't know enough about any of it, you know, about energy and where it goes and how it works and effects. I mean, you know, I think that, like I said, I've always been, when I heard strange noises or voices in the house, I was always polite because I figured they had every right to, they were there before I was. So don't be rude.
No sense in picking a fight with a ghost. That's what I say.
And I've always just been that way. People are like, well, you believe in that? Not saying I do, not saying I don't, but you know, I don't want to be on the losing side. So you know, we'll just kind of be polite and go along with everything, and then we'll see from there.
Yeah.
You know, so
Why take a chance, right?
Yeah.
I'm not convinced yet. I mean, like I said, I've been to, you know, some of the creepier places around. I mean, because of Teresa and her investigations. I mean, I've always sort of been down the middle on that sort of thing. Have I had feelings that were creepy? Yes. Have I seen things that I thought were pretty darn creepy? Yes. And would I like to believe they could do it? Yes. I think a lot of people would like to think that, because that gives you that certainly gives you hope for what, you know, beyond the veil, as it were. But I'm not 100% convinced on it. Now, you know, we touched on Ouija boards, some other stuff. Has anyone had any experience or heard anything about stuff like ghost writing? And I don't mean like having an author write another guy's book. I mean like, you know, print on the written page or on a wall or something like that. That was a thing. I remember seeing a lot of stuff back in the day on like That's Incredible and stuff. They'd always cover these ghosts that were supposedly had written poetry or written books or written through someone. What's your opinion on that sort of thing? And for that matter, what do you think about a ghost communicating through a medium or a someone they use as a mouthpiece? Have you given any credence to that sort of thing? Start with you, Flack.
Well, you know, we were just talking in the chat about Harry Houdini, who was one of those people that I think is like me, that wasn't a necessary. Well, I don't know that he was a non-believer, but he was trying to find someone who wasn't a charlatan. You know, someone who wasn't, because during that time it was very popular to do these seances and that, you know, and he would expose them. He would show their tricks and he would show how they did these different things. You know, one of the things I find really distasteful are these people that, you know, some of them are on reality TV, some of them are associated with different things, where they will say, well, I will talk to your dead ones for you, or I will, you know, you have a missing person case and I will try to tell you what happened. And of course, when it's not on the air, all that stuff is for money. You know, they charge for that. And so that, like, if I could talk to ghosts, I wouldn't have a 1-900 number. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I think that's a service you should probably provide to people. So
call me now. You could be like that.
Right.
Shit.
You know, Right, $3 a minute, call me and I'll talk to whoever you want. So it's definitely like a lot of the topics that we've covered on other episodes of the show, which is the things that I wish they were. I will tell you one time, this is not quite a medium, but when I was in high school, my senior year, I went to a haunted house. So this was like a local thing for Halloween. I went to a haunted house, and it was one of those big, big to-dos, and they had all different kinds of things. And one of the things they had was a fortune teller, and someone who could, read my palm and stare into this crystal ball, which I'm pretty sure had a light bulb in it, and she looked at, I was there with 3 friends, and she one by one went all of us, and then she looked at my hand and said, you have a very short lifeline, and it looks like you're not going to live very long, or that you should have died already.
Oh, geez.
And I thought, who the hell would say that to a 17-year-old kid? What is that? Like, I just paid $5 for this.
Wow.
Like, can't you come up with something better? But maybe I'd been being a brat that night or something. I don't remember. But I always do remember that. I can remember her telling me that. So, yeah, I think if you can talk to ghosts and they tell you bad news, maybe you shouldn't pass it on.
That's good stuff. Hey, listen, we just got an email in. If you'll indulge, I'm going to read this. In fact, our friend Benz666 sent this over. Hey, with a name like that, you never know. He writes, "Hey guys, I'm not sure if this counts, but it's something that I was told this very week, so I thought I'd share it. On Tuesday, I met my cousin Allison for the first time in 25 years. In the intervening years, her father, my uncle, had passed away. This is the story that she told me, which happened about 18 years ago. My Uncle John had cancer and was in a hospice for the last few months of his life. In his heyday, he had run a removal company and a petrol station, that's a gas station. One of his regular customers was Mr. Wiley, who became a well-known friend to the family. When John was in hospice, it turned out that Mr. Wiley was also a resident, having become ill while suffering from dementia. At least once a day, Mr. Wiley would walk into John's room and ask, 'Is that Big John Young?' To which my cousin would always answer, 'Yes, Mr. Wiley, he's not very well.' Towards the end, my cousin got into the habit of staying overnight with him. On this occasion, she had spent the night talking to him and singing songs. Around 6 a.m., a nurse came in and said that she should get some sleep. As Allison went to leave the nurse called her back and said her uncle's breathing had changed and maybe she should stay. So she did. A few minutes later, there was a commotion as the nurses rushed to another bed to care for a patient who was clearly in distress. At that time, my uncle passed. Allison knew that he had died, but could also see that the nurses were busy trying to save another patient, so she sat quietly with her dad until things calmed down. During this time, Mr. Wiley appeared. Instead of doing his usual, 'Is that Big John Young?' this time he was insistent that he'd seen John leaving with a young woman. He was adamant. My cousin assured him that John had just passed. Late, my cousin went for a cigarette in the conservatory of the hospice. A man came into the conservatory who was clearly upset. My cousin asked if he was okay. He said his daughter had just died. They chatted for a while, and he told her that at the end, his daughter had kept saying, "What's your name?" Eventually, she said, "Ah, your name is John." She died moments later. She was 20 years old. I'm not religious or spiritual in the slightest, but this made me think. So I count it as a message from beyond the grave. Yes, I guarantee you that's a message from beyond the grave. What do you guys make of that?
Yeah, crazy story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will tell you that the biggest believer of anybody I know in the afterlife and has stories, maybe hundreds of stories, is my sister-in-law, who is a hospice nurse and has seen and heard people say all sorts of things when they're about to pass away. So, and somebody who is with so many people at that exact moment when they pass from the living to the dead. So, Yeah, it's there's a lot of people see a lot of strange things right at that moment.
Hey, listen, thank you for sharing your story with us, Ben. That was a very intriguing and thought-provoking tale, but it does leave you with a bit of comfort to think that perhaps Big John and this young girl had walked arm in arm into oblivion, into eternity, to receive their reward and whatnot. Very nice, very lovely message. Well, fellas, we're gonna go run the horn real quick. Any final thoughts before we call it a night here? What about you, Patty?
No, I think some of the stuff we heard this evening was fantastic, and amazing, and I think a lot like me when my wife got on me for saying that I didn't have anything, and she's like, "No, you got so much stuff you don't think about it." I think we all have something. Everyone that didn't chime in tonight, thinking they didn't have anything, I bet you do.
Yeah.
It all shows up in different ways or different times or different things. But if you go back and look back, you'll go like that. Huh? Yeah, that was. I did have an uncle that said this, or I had an aunt that, or a grandfather that. You're always gonna have something like that. So, no, I think it's all affected each of us more than we think about sometimes. But no, this has been a great episode. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Very good. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us, Patty. Boat, any final thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I just think that whenever we talk about messages from beyond the grave or unexplained occurrences that involve us seeing people that aren't with us anymore, it does sort of make you think about all the things that we don't know and we don't understand, and what out there exists beyond our sixth senses. And even if you're skeptical about the whole thing, it still sort of opens up avenues in your own thinking that can profoundly affect the way you live your life.
Very good. Very well said, Boat. Flack, any final thoughts on this topic?
As we've been talking tonight, I was just thinking about some of the other topics that we've proposed and we've talked about, and like we said, we might do a show like on Bigfoot. And I think Bigfoot's interesting, but if I go in the backyard, I'm not really afraid that Bigfoot's going to get me. You know what I mean? And it's the alien abductions. I think I could talk and listen to stories about aliens and alien abductions, just all night long. But at the end of the day, when I go out at night at midnight in my backyard, I'm just not really afraid of, being abducted by aliens. And so I almost wanted to end by saying, I hope that I do get contacted by a spirit tonight. I hope, but I don't really want to say that because there's just that little thing where it feels a little more real. It feels a little more like it's possible. Most people don't have a story where they've actually seen something that they thought was Bigfoot or something, but lots of people have stories where they feel like they have been contacted from somebody who has passed away or been told or warned or something like that. And there's just so many of those that it just feels like there might be something there. So that's just one of those things I don't really feel like I want to tempt.
Yeah. The way I think of it when it comes from a message from beyond the grave, it's a sinister title, cool guy title. But what are we talking about? We're talking about contact with the dead and all that entails. And it could be spooky and creepy, or it could be sort of gentle, like Ben's story with Big John. I would like to think it's more the latter. I've got really good dear friends that have passed on way too early, and it is a comforting thought to think that they're around, and kind of occasionally checking on me. I told the story on Amigos once of how we went and put my buddy's headstone over his unmarked grave because he, at the time of his passing, they couldn't afford a headstone, and ultimately that headstone was pulled and a nicer one was put in, and I've got the headstone in my laundry room right now. So I feel, which is goofy, I'll grant you, but I always keep hold of that because I like to think of my friend when I occasionally when I go in there or just think about it being in there, and I hope that there's a connection there, that he is still around. I'm at ease with the possibility of having a spirit nearby, and I would love to hear some direct message. And to tie this in with last week's show on dreams, I've dreamed about a lot of my passed away buddies many times, and many times had conversations with them knowing they were dead, and so there's some relief to it. So I guess if I can close the show with anything, a message from beyond the grave can always be horrific or scary, but it's often, I think, could be a nice thing, a comforting thing, and you could look at it either way, I suppose, the creepy way or the fun way. With all that said, we're going to close the door on this edition of Conversations from the Dark Side. As you guys know, we are playing these on our channel throughout October to celebrate Halloween. Next week's topic has already been determined, and next week's topic is just going to be a simple ghost stories. This week broadcast 2 days before Halloween, so pull out your best ghost story and get with me at one of our various connection points. I love to hear them, and for that matter, we're going to use next week's as sort of a catch-all for something that you wanted to say about the previous topics that you didn't get in. Feel free to send anything you want. Again, our automated voicemail is open 24/7, and you can always email. So at any point, feel free to send in a voicemail. We'd love to play it on the air. Again, thanks to our friends Pat and Boat and Rob Flack O'Hara for helping me out tonight. And I hope you guys have a pleasant evening. And if you receive a message from the grave tonight, I hope it is a pleasant one. Have a good evening, everybody. It's been fun for us, and we will catch you guys next week on Conversations from the Dark Side.
You have just experienced Conversations from the Dark Side. Until next week, try to enjoy the daylight.